One of the interesting ideas you pointed out during the module is about contemporary social sculpture beyond the thought of Joseph Beuys. Could you tell more about it?
I think Joseph Beuys conceived a very important notion of the art practice, which is a very expanded art practice that comes under the name of social sculpture. But I also think that this definition got very stuck to his persona, to his authorship, while I guess that there are important elements that can be retrieved from his practice, taking the shape of a contemporary social sculpture. At the moment, I'm doing my doctorate at the Brooks University, where the artist Shelley Sachs created a research unit in contemporary social sculpture. And I can address her thought around this theme, as she also worked personally with and studied with Joseph Beuys. So her idea is to retrieve elements such as a notion of expanded art, the notion of connectivity, the understanding of internal activation as well as external activation in an engaged art practice. And those are elements which are rarely mentioned when we talk about engaged art practice or engaged socially art practice or participatorial art. And those elements define the role of the artist or the activators within those dynamics, that is never an external observer, but is always a subject taking part of the collective transformation, so to speak.
In the module, you often discussed about tools for participatory practices. Which are, in your opinion, the most important ones?
The reason why I emphasize on tools, or maybe it's better to speak about capacities, I guess is because though we have developed a glossary and an understanding of participatory practice, you might name it engaged art practice, socially engaged practice, and so on and so forth. However, when it comes to what kind of skills and tools we need to practice in this field, we haven't really developed a set of skills that we think are needed. What I mean is, for instance, you might study those practices in art colleges, but the way you study is through examples rather than building your capacities to actually develop the practice. So, for instance, there are very important tools that we can borrow from other fields, such as mediation, for instance, or sociology, anthropology, psychology. For instance, the capacity to enhance your active listening, strengthen your empathy towards the other, understanding what does empathy mean versus an effective approach to the other. Also to have a better understanding of the definition of the other and of the I when you create an intersubjective space, meaning a space that is shared, that doesn't belong to you or to the other, but is a space that you create in common. And I guess that those are all capacities that one can grow and expand. And that's why I talk about the toolkit, so to speak.
I would like to know more about your project, Beit al-Karama in Nablus.
Beit al-Karama means House of Dignity. It's a project that was conceived in 2009 and 10 through the encounter that I had with a local activist, a woman called Fatima Kaddoumi, in the old city of Nablus. And that happened when I was visiting Nablus in 2009 during an art residency. This meeting was one of those very special meetings that you have in your life, and sometimes you really click with a person. And I find myself having a long coffee after the break of the fast during the Ramadan, and being hosted in her family, in her house. And she kept on hosting me, and I became acquainted with her husband, kids, and large family. And back then, it was 2009, we also had the chance to share a lot of stories, and Fatima was very generous in sharing the situation that especially women were living in the old city of Nablus, which is a very conservative and chauvinist environment. And also is a very poor, economically speaking, poor environment. And I was very interested in the condition of women. And actually Fatima back then, she shared with me this dream of creating a place where women could start to live again, to share a space where they could both generate an economy, but also where they could just share time. And it was on that occasion actually that I remember one morning I shared with Fatima this idea of making a cooking school, which I guess that she thought that was pretty crazy back then, but she thought I was crazy probably because how can you justify a cooking school to a society that is still under occupation? Nevertheless, I did come back the year after this period of residency, and we started to work on this idea. The idea was actually of a social enterprise, as we wanted to create a place where women would have an actual working engagement. And the logic of a social enterprise is that what you generate as an extra income goes into cultural, social activities. The process was, of course, very long, and we took care of everything from the fundraising to identifying a building that we could renovate and where we could implement the center. And we opened the center in 2012. But in fact, in 2010, I moved to Nablus, and then I started to live between Nablus, Ramallah, and Jerusalem for about 4 years and a half. And I did that because I do believe that such a long process needs your presence. You need to be close to the process. You can't handle it remotely, not for this kind of process at least. And as I believe that the artist initiator, name it a little bit as you want, is part of the process himself, and he is also undergoing a transformation while the process develops. Your presence is required. And of course it was ongoing negotiations between different working modalities. I don't know, I remember sitting on a budget for an application for a foundation for about a week when I understood that actually Fatima, she knew what the word budget meant, but she didn't know what application and foundation was. Which was totally fine. It was my mistake to give for granted that these structures could be exported anywhere. I'm just giving those, few examples. Nevertheless, the idea was actually very simple, and in fact, what we did, we created this center where now we have a kitchen that hosts cooking classes, and we teach Palestinian traditional cuisine. We have a training room where we host both trainings, educational programs, social activities, and so on and so forth, but also large groups and lunch. We give culinary tours in the old city. As food for us is really a vehicle of resilience in a way. We take food as a vehicle of culture. We take food as a form of resistance. So food is really a strategy for us, has been a strategy to involve women, to make them understand that themselves they are cultural agents. So now we give full-time job to about 5 women and flexible work to 20 to 30 women, local women of course. And they have also been part of research we have done around food, because there was not much information around the Nabucene food. So we created our own research unit, and women that were themselves field researcher, interviewing each others, collecting stories, and so on and so forth. So all this experience has been not only mine and Fatima, and we have served something for the others, but have been really a collective experience in order to understand partly who we are and what collectively we can bring into a society. And I guess that now we have reached almost a self-sustainable place, so we need less and less support from external funds. And mainly we have created a strong attachment from the community.